Welcome back to the channel where I provide regular cricket content on interesting topics. Today's video is the second of a two-part series where I list who I believe are the best 10 Test wicketkeepers in the history of the game. You can find a link to the first part with numbers 10 to 6 in the description to this video. I will be including both their wicket-keeping skills and also their ability with the bat to chip in with runs also. A good wicket-keeper batsman can transform a side, so it is a good way of showing praise to some of the most important players in cricketing history. Let's crack on with the list. Number 5, Quinton de Kock. Right, before you reach for the dislike button, you have to hear me out with this one. I researched high and low in order to make this list, and I was honestly really amazed at how good the South African's record is. De Kock grew up as a baseball player and even considered a move to the United States, but his father convinced him to pursue cricket instead. This is something that South Africa would have been very thankful of. He would go on to represent the country in all three formats and show a good adjustability to the different requirements of the game. In the longest format his record is excellent. With the bat in Test cricket he averaged 39, scoring at an excellent strike rate of 70 runs per 100 balls. Whilst his batting record is in the top drawer for keepers in Tests, it is his dismissal ratio which shocked me. De Kock averaged 4.5 dismissals a game. That is better than Healy, Dujon or almost any other keeper in the history of Test cricket. With the bat he really found his stride in 2016, scoring an excellent 100 against England in Centurion and then another against Australia later in the year. From there on he performed solidly with the bat and was one of the most reliable players in the South African side. I don't know why, but De Kock doesn't spring to mind when I think of great keeper batsmen, but he has a record which can be put up against anyone in history, and I mean anyone. So with that in mind, he is a surprise number 5 in my greatest keeper batsman of all time. Number 4, Mahendra Singh Dhoni. Now on to one of the true superstars of the game and an excellent Test player in his own right. Dhoni had to contend with challenges which dwarf the other players in this top 10. Firstly, he was captain for a long period of his run in the Test side, taking India to number 1 in the World Test rankings in the process. The pressure and scrutiny therefore on Dhoni, not just for his keeping but also for his captaincy, is something that say Gilchrist just didn't have to deal with. Then you add that to the fact that Dhoni was keeping in a very spin-focused bowling attack, meaning that he was not only crouched down for long periods but just keeping in general is more challenging standing up to the stumps. Still, with all these challenges he managed to carve out an excellent record in the longest format. Dhoni ended his career in whites with a good record for a wicketkeeper, 4,876 runs at an average of just over 38 and 600s. He had also captained India to more Test wins, 27, than anyone else. As a batsman I think he will be best remembered for his stunning 224 he scored against Australia in 2013. Double hundreds don't come often for wicket-keepers, especially against the might of the Australians. Dhoni's keeping record is actually more disappointing than I thought it would be, with him averaging 3.3 dismissals per game. Overall, however, for his impact on the game, very good batting record and solid keeping record, he is a worthy number 4 in my list. Number 3, Kumar Sangakkara. We are down to the cream of the crop now, and no better place to start than with the great Sri Lankan. Unlike some of the batting superstars who had come from Sri Lanka previously, Sangakkara was not a batsman who used brute force. He was a majestic batsman who would caress the ball seemingly at will. He had the temperament and technique to score runs all over the world, and when he got in, he would often go big. Famously, he and Mahela Jayawardene put on a record 624 against a South African attack boasting Dale Steyn and Makaya Ntini. Kumar would end up with 287 to his name. He scored runs in Australia also, including a dazzling 192 in Hobart. Sangakkara was universally recognised as one of the best batsmen of his era and won a host of awards. The Sri Lankan won the top prize at 2012's ICC Awards, in addition to the award for Test Cricketer of the Year and the People's Choice Award for the second year running. Later that year he confirmed himself among batting's modern greats, by becoming the equal fastest man to 10,000 Test runs alongside Sachin Tendulkar and Brian Lara. But batting wasn't his only ability. He was a very skillful wicketkeeper who at times had the unenviable job of keeping to the great Matthias Muralitharan. His dismissal ratio is solid but not otherworldly, sitting at around average of 3 per game. But he should be credited with the fact it is often harder to keep to spinners than it is quick bowlers, especially in the Sri Lankan heat. Judged on his batting alone, Sangakkara could very easily make it into an all-time World Test team, so how can I possibly have 2 players above him in this list? Well, this is not a list of just batsmen alone, it is crucially when they are keeping wicket also. In the same way that Alex Stewart's batting record dropped significantly when keeping, Sangakkara suffered the same fate. The difference between his batting record when keeping or not is vast. When he was left to his batting he averaged an almost godlike 66.8. But when he had the gloves his batting average dropped to 40.5. That puts him at the business end of wicketkeeper batsman but isn't as good as many might think. But overall for his silky batting and steady keeping in challenging conditions, Sangakkara is a worthy number 3 in my list. Number 2, Adam Gilchrist. In what may be a bombshell to some, the next great wicketkeeper batsman in my list is the universally loved Adam Gilchrist. I have previously reported my admiration of the Aussie great in other videos, but during his run in the Test arena it almost felt unfair that the Australians had him in their team. Sides would have worked their backside off to get Australia 5 down, only to see this absolute destroyer of attacks march out into the middle. Although he was late to Test cricket, he got into his stride almost immediately, scoring a rapid 81 on debut. From there it was a career littered with sparkling performances. 3 Gilchrist innings which stand out in his career are his amazing, unbeaten 149 against Pakistan in Hobart in 1999 when all seemed lost. His savage and emotional 204 not out against South Africa in Johannesburg 2 years on, and painfully for Poms, his 57 delivery Ashes century in Perth. Overall Gilly scored 1700s at an average of 47.6 with a strike rate of over 80. He was almost as good of a keeper as he was a batsman, averaging an excellent 4.3 dismissals per game, including keeping to the difficult Shane Warne for long periods. Overall for his explosive batting and excellent wicket-keeping, Adam Gilchrist is a worthy number 2 in my list. Number 1, Andy Flower. I know this will be controversial and you are all hovering over the dislike button, but please let me state my case. I believe that Andy Flower is one of the most underrated players in the history of the game, and that his omission from conversations about him being the greatest keeper batsman is greatly unfair. Let's start with a big factor, Flower's Test batting record. Remember that Gilchrist averaged 47.6, Flower on the other hand had an average of 51.5. That is better than Gavaskar, Hayden and Steve Waugh. But averages don't tell the whole story. A big factor for me is the teammates which Flower and Gilchrist had alongside them. Gilly would usually come into bat when Australia were in a strong position, with it being rare that Hayden, Langer, Ponting and Waugh all failed. That is compared to Flower being surrounded by part-time players and amateurs. Imagine for a second the burden on Flower having to prop up an entire batting lineup, keep wicket and often captain the side. He managed all of this and climbed to the summit of the World Test batting rankings on a number of occasions, something in itself being an incredible achievement. Flower was no home track bully either, he averaged 53 with the bat in Asia, Gilly on the other hand averaged 37. With the gloves Flower only averaged 2.6 dismissals a match, which does place him a long way back from the Australian. But it has to be remembered that Zimbabwe got a lot less wickets per game overall when compared to the Aussies, often only bowling at their opponents once per test match. Cynics will argue that the case against Flower is that sides were known to rest players when they were facing Zimbabwe, which is fair. But weighed up against the other factors and his incredible batting against the odds, Flower for me is a worthy number 1. So that is my case. Perhaps it is me wanting to stick up for the little guy, or to give credit to someone who is often forgotten about in discussions about the greatest players. Or perhaps just on his incredible batting record he is a deserved number 1, you tell me in the comments. Thanks for watching and participating everyone.